Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Today we're going to continue our series on how Star Wars military factions work. We already covered the Empire and Rebellion last week, so today we'll be going back in time to the Clone Wars period and look at the Confederacy of Independent Systems, otherwise known as the Separatist Alliance. Now, if you just watched the prequel trilogies, you know that the Separatist Alliance are the so-called bad guys and use giant hordes of robotic soldiers. But like any faction or group of people, when you look a little deeper, you'll notice a very complicated system that defies the simple label of just being bad guys. For those of you fans out there who watched the two Clone Wars cartoon series, you'll know that the Separatist Alliance is actually made up of several different planetary systems in the outer rim areas of the galaxy. There was a real growing issue in the Republic. While the core worlds were well taken care of and protected, the outer rims were more or less neglected. It's kind of like how people from Manhattan always crap on Staten Island. The federal judicial forces were stretched thin, and many of the Outer Rim systems had to defend themselves from pirates and other criminal enterprises. And while the Outer Rim systems didn't enjoy the same kind of benefits that the core systems did, they still had to face the same kind of regulation and taxes. It was a lot of taxation for limited representation, and naturally the citizens of these planets were upset and felt the Republic's leaders were completely out of touch with the needs of their people. It kind of reminds me of the disconnect we see here in the United States between the coastal enclaves and the rest of the country. It's two different people with different needs under one government. So at least outwardly, the separatist secessionist movement wasn't necessarily evil. It was addressing the real concerns and grievances people had in the Outer Rim. Now, Lucasfilms really tries to convince us that the separatists are real jerks. I mean, just look at their hilariously stereotypical bad guys. There's steampunk Nazi guy, Sharkman, and literally just a giant tarantula who later is turned into cyborg tarantula. They're literally just taking popular phobias and turning them into bad guy characters. But this all pointed towards a darker underlying purpose of the Separatist Alliance. It was created by Darth Sidious in order to push the galaxy towards chaos and panic, which would create the right conditions for an authoritative government to take over and the establishment of a larger federal military. As with all things involving Palpatine, there was always a secondary and even tertiary purpose for almost everything. Now let's look at the CIS's military's philosophy at the strategic, operational, and tactical level. The CIS's strategic goals were multifaceted. After the Battle of Geonosis, many groups at the system, planetary, national, and even tribal level declared independence from the Republic and tried to join the Separatist Alliance. The CIS focused on supporting these newly independent factions, especially the more strategically important ones. Despite having thousands of planets on their side, the Separatists were still outnumbered by the Republic, so gathering new member states was extremely important. At the same time, the CIS focused on preventing the Republic from taking back planets that had declared independence. The CIS also contacted and supported opposition governments that were running or fighting against pro-Republic governments. Facing the Grand Army of the Republic, the Separatists also researched ways to eliminate the clone soldiers by creating biological weapons that attacked only the Fett genome. But as we would all find out later on, a Fett's greatest weakness wasn't a disease necessarily, but a blind man wearing space Adidas track pants, wielding a stick. The CIS had to destroy the Republic's ability and will to continue the war so that their newly established Confederacy could function freely. The true strategy, however, as dictated by Palpatine, was to create chaos, undermine the Jedi Order, by exposing the Jedi to increasingly difficult combat situations, which not only killed many members of the Order, but also made many Jedi disillusioned, and in extreme cases, caused a few Jedi to turn to the dark side. At an operational level, the Separatist Alliance wielded one of the most potent military forces the galaxy has ever seen. While the clone troopers were probably some of the best trained individual soldiers in galactic history, in the end, it was a numbers game. It took almost 9 years to make the first generation clone soldier. The average B-1 battle droid was manufactured in just a few hours or even minutes on some assembly lines. And it was because their soldiers were so cheap to manufacture, the Separatist military was able to deploy a ridiculous amount of units in every theater of the war. One of the reasons the Confederacy didn't use civilian soldiers was because it was a democracy. And as we all know, when you have a prolonged war with civilian fighters, you're going to have war fatigue at a very increased rate. Using a droid army meant that casualties weren't necessarily a huge issue, and commanders could be more careless and aggressive with their deployment and take larger risks. If anything, using droids is more ethically sound than, say, using clones, which are essentially humans that are born into slavery to fight for the Republic. Because of the mercantile background of many Separatist Alliance member states, the CIS had a very well-established network of raw material and factories to produce new war machines, and they even converted several large freighters into carriers for droid fighters and droid armies, and they repurposed many of their factories to create war material. At a tactical level, the Separatist military depended on their generals and droid commanders. Because droid units were more or less standardized, it was up to the individual leaders to use them effectively. The average battle droid typically did a better job fighting behind fortifications in defensive positions, and they also did well in large numbers in open spaces. Special units like Droidicas, Super Battle Droids, and BX Commando Droids carried out special operations and were usually used as shock troops for offensive attacks. Again, because they are machines, commanders didn't have any emotional attachments to their troops, and more risky and aggressive tactics could be used. Separatist armor and artillery focused more on missile tech than turbo lasers. While these missiles did more damage, they were also easier to intercept. In space, the Separatist Navy also depended on swarm tactics using droid fighters that were extremely maneuverable and small because they lacked pilots and life support systems. Droid fighters, however, had an even more limited range than TIE fighters and were always used for anti-ship patrols and short-range offensive engagements. The Separatists also used swarms of the feared Buzz droid to overwhelm the enemy. Had Palpatine not been behind the CIS, I'm pretty sure the Separatists would have defeated the Republic or at least forced them to reassess their long-term strategy. Battle droids were simply too easy to manufacture. Even if the average clone was worth 10 B-1 battle droids, they just didn't have the numbers to stop the Separatist Alliance in a real full-out war. The Separatist Alliance droid army shows us a frightening prospect of what our future here on Earth might look like. As more and more countries begin weaponizing automated platforms, we're looking at a future with less humans fighting in the military. The good news is less civilians will have to join the military and fight in wars. The bad news is it'll be easier for leaders to declare war with no fear of losing civilians in battle, unless you account the ones that are lost due to collateral damage. But the future is unstoppable because it's always going to be cheaper, faster, and easier to build a robot rather than raise a human until the age of 18. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button. And special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there. Just a reminder, if you want to protect your child's future, you really got to destroy all the machines now before they connect with each other and take over our defense grid. And remember, suspect everything, including your talking fridge, your automatic vacuum cleaner robot thingy, and yes, even robot porgs. Don't let the cuteness lower your guard. Thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.